Hello, everybody. My name is Joel Filderman, and welcome to the Dog Trainers Connection. I am not a dog trainer. These other people you see here are. We get together, we discuss a topic, come up with some thoughts, some ideas, sometimes some answers, but we always have an interesting discussion. For today's topic, trainers, we're recording this right as a really bad hurricane had hit Florida and parts of the South, and we're getting the remnants of that up here now. So we were discussing right before we went on and saying that an interesting topic to discuss would be preparation for the dogs. A lot of conversation is always around preparation for the people, boarding up the windows, making sure you're stocked, making all those other things. What can be done to prepare the dogs? What can be done to either prepare the dogs to be safe, or what can be done to make sure that the dogs are taken care of? And we can discuss that from the natural disaster perspective, or we can just discuss that from just regular emergency. Do you know what you need to do to have an emergency preparedness for your dog? So with that, Pam, do you want to start it today?
Well, sure.
Since it was pretty much your topic, so go ahead.
Well, the thought is that there has been lately a lot of pushback on crating dogs and on handling dogs. And there was a picture that went around on Facebook at the beginning of the hurricane that was an elementary school with a line of wire crates down a hallway. And this was going to be a shelter situation for people affected by the hurricane. So, if you found yourself in an emergency shelter situation, would your dog be okay with being crated? For some dogs that have never been crated, my take on it is I encourage it for all dogs, even if you're never going to leave them alone. At some point, you might have an emergency and they need to spend a night in a vet's office or even an afternoon in a vet's office, and they're going to crate your dog.
Sure.
And so you don't want that to be a stressful add to the stress as being the first experience.
Yeah.
So the idea that your dogs need to be prepared to be crated, and maybe they need to be prepared to jump in a car at a moment's notice and they don't really like riding in the car. So maybe you need to work on that. Those are the kinds of things. Some of us have a go bag in the house somewhere that if there was an emergency, if I had to go tomorrow, just run out the door, I could just grab this and have collars and leashes and bowls and things. I've got a friend who's a vet that posted a picture of her set up in her car with her slip leads to grab the dogs and that kind of thing. I mean, let's face it, every one of us sitting here today has heard a story of a rescue dog that just arrived in its new location and slipped out of a leash or a collar or a harness. It backed out of it or whatever. And it was in a brand new location and was panic stricken and gone because they didn't have the right equipment available to contain the dog. So that's something we can all help our clients make sure they've got.
Sure.
And be ready for. I know Jeff is probably living the answer to this conversation at the moment. I'm up in the Northeast where I'm warm and dry.
So Jeff?
Is that the segue to me?
That's my segue to you.
So before I start, so for anyone I'm down in the Southeast and I lived, up in North Jersey most of my life. We're down here 8 years now. So I think we were here, I don't know, less than a year. No, actually less than a couple of months.
Yes,
it was like the first year we were here, 2014. And we got our first tornado warning on our cell phones. Okay. So here's me and my wife. We have this house full of animals. We get a tornado warning. We don't have a clue what a tornado warning is other than, holy crap, we're going to get hit by a tornado. So here we are, both of us walking around with drumsticks in our hand because we were eating dinner, running around literally like chickens with no heads. She's grabbing her important papers. I'm trying to find leashes. It was insane. And that's when I knew we were not prepared.
Mm.
Right?
Okay.
And now,
Yeah.
mind you, I'd had a lot of knowledge in my head just from curiosity over the years of being prepared. But until, and now we understand what all the warnings are. And obviously there's a lot
Yes.
of things that we evolved personally, but until you're there and you first realize, and this is the biggest deficiency for pet owners, is not having a plan.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the first thing to do is to have a plan, right? Now, obviously, our thing, if there was storms or whatever, the way our house is set up, even if I have dogs in the boarding barn or the indoor-outdoor kennel, we can bring them inside the house, which is generally what we do now when we know a hurricane is coming, if we're not going to evacuate. But anyway, have a plan. That's the first thing. You have to, it depends on how many animals you have, how many people in the household, how many cars you'll be driving.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, the crate aspect that Pam brought up, because most people who don't crate generally don't need it because either they're home or they're of the it's a prison mindset, right? Which I won't get into that here. We know that is completely false, right? There's a gazillion reasons why crate training is for the benefit of the dog. So get your human emotions out of it. I won't dwell on that. So your plans, obviously, you got to think of in terms of survival, right? It doesn't seem like that, but that needs to be your mindset, right?
Yes.
Food, water, shelter, right? So if we're evacuating, our shelter becomes our car until we get to our final destination. Crating, obviously, or doggy seat belts. I'm a big fan of secure leashes, collars. I don't like harnesses or gentle leaders in times of stress because dogs can escape them. They say you should have enough food for 3 days. If you know something, like if it's a tornado, obviously people in the Midwest who deal with tornadoes, they have 16 minutes, right? With tornadoes and with hurricanes, wildfires, floods, we generally have time to prepare. Just get as much food as you could fit in wherever you're going, right? That's the main thing. Medication, canned goods if you need it for the dogs. I suggest
Can opener to go with your canned goods.
Yeah, exactly. I suggest canned pumpkin because even if you don't change diet, stress can cause gastrointestinal upset. Having pumpkin can help offset that. Treats, recreational chews to help the dog deal with stress. Natural stress relief, whether it's CBD or calming treats or anything like that. I won't go on because I'll let other people, chime in, but it's also important. And my wife and I now, we all have our roles. Now, fortunately, it's only two of us. It's a little easier, but we are married 23 years. So communication could be a little hot and cold. All kidding aside, you need to have, clear responsibilities of who's in charge of what, period.
So that those things are done.
Exactly. So, our biggest challenge is, we feed fresh food and stuff like that. So we have, I always have freeze-dried food available, especially if we know a hurricane's coming. I actually stock up on freeze-dried raw food because I don't have to worry about refrigeration. I may not know when I can put the generator up to power the house. So, things like that. We also I have gallon bottles that we buy for ourselves, and when they're empty, I always have 15, 20 filled up. So I try to have as many gallons as possible, just to hold me over, and then we load up on water and stuff. And then for those traveling, towels, paper towels, cleaning products, all that kind of stuff that you need for your pets. And obviously the most important, pets with medical issues, you need to make sure you have enough of their medication. So that's my quick rundown.
Okay.
Wow. I was just thinking, Jeff, that, where you live too may prompt you more for the natural disasters, that you're going to be more ready. Because like me growing up in Manhattan and living in Manhattan most of my life, there were blackouts and that kind of disaster, but there was always, a store around the corner where you could go get a can of food for yourself or your dog, or, and it just, I don't think there was the mindset of being prepared to that degree, which makes sense when
Yeah,
you're,
that's what happened to us when we moved down here.
yeah, exactly.
And it hasn't happened since. I made sure of that.
And I would think also that, you know,
And
that as these disasters get worse and these disasters get more often,
yes,
that those places that used to be, oh, I don't really need to worry about this anymore, are getting to be like, well, maybe that might happen here. You know, you mentioned the tornado with the 16, you know, the 16 minutes for the tornado, but I'm sure the people who live in Tornado Alley make sure that they are stocked. So when that 16 minutes hits, that
Yeah.
they know, okay, I can, you know, take care of myself and my animals, hopefully.
and
Yeah.
I mean, it you know, it makes me realize, and I'm sure you too, Joel, that it's important to be prepared. And
Sure.
you know,
Well, we live close enough to a flood zone that where we live, upstate New York, that that's certainly something we should consider.
and we've had several power outages
Yep.
in the 5 years we've been through, a lot, you
Yep.
know. And we have a dog who really hates the crate, and our crate training has been not that great and successful.
Yeah.
Because of the intensity of her, just the crate games, the food, the desensitizing to it is, so far it's, you're going in you're going to be dragged in, because that's how she's getting in the crate. And
Well, you know,
Well, and if it's an emergency and you have to do that,
that's
you
where
do
she's
that.
going.
yeah,
Yep.
yes.
And in the meantime, we're trying to figure out novel ways to,
But Pam, the thing is, last night, you know, our dog is very rain phobic, and we got some rain last night. And what we'll do is we'll give her some stuff to calm her down and put her in a room that, you know, there's less noise. She didn't want to go in the room last night, and I had her on the leash and collar, and the collar, she literally was like, I'm not going in, tried to pull back, and the collar came off. So
Yep.
as you know, you were talking about, I was very struck by that. One of the
Slip
things
leads.
that Jeff,
yes, and exactly, not the buckle collar she was
Yeah.
Slip
on.
leads.
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah. One of the things that Jeff wanted to mention as well in what he was describing as what you need for preparedness is also a first aid kit. And I'm assuming that's also that there are certain things that need to be in there for dogs that aren't necessarily going to be in there for people. So
And you need to make sure everything in there is fresh.
yes,
A lot of
course.
people have a tendency to put together a first aid kit and never look at it again.
Yep.
And 5 years,
That's
10
true.
years go by
25
and they
years.
actually
Yep.
need something out of there, and
Yep.
everything in there
It's
is
expired or
old
whatever.
and
Yeah.
expired, and the Band-Aids have dried out. And
I worked
So-
in restaurants for years, and I cannot tell you how many first aid kits I went into where you know, it was like, you can't, you know, the thing was so coagulated that you couldn't get the burn ointment out. You know, it was like, it was ridiculous.
what do you guys suggest for a first aid kit for dogs?
Well, they have actually first aid kits for dogs available. That's probably the easiest way for someone to purchase.
Okay.
The main thing is the basics, obviously, is something to clean out wounds. But most importantly, for wraps, you have to have the wraps that adhere to itself as you wrap it around, because regular like wraps don't attach to hair, dog
Right.
hair.
Right,
So,
with the Velcro
Velcro or
at
even
the
the,
end.
the self, yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, the easiest thing to do is just there's so many dog first aid kits available
Okay.
now too with the basics. But
That's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously if you have the time, get CPR, get for first aid certified. You know, they have organizations out there that do that. Even just a 1-day class is all you really need. You know, and they're fairly inexpensive.
Mm-hmm.
So do that.
And you're talking for animals?
For
David?
animals, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
Red Cross offers a animal first aid class, and
Yeah.
there's a company called Pet Tech.
Yep,
that offers
that's what I couldn't think of
the
the name.
Pet
That's
Tech
where I
is,
got
I was certified in Pet Tech.
same here.
First aid. I
Okay.
did that when I was an IACP member, and that's an awesome class.
It
Dog
is. It's very
trainers,
good.
everybody should look into
Yep. Yep.
Pet Tech, because it's wellness as well as first aid. It's a really nice comprehensive class.
Right.
But you know, there was a dog trainer that I know that posted on Facebook that has a little trailer, and she's got it all set up for emergencies. And she said she needed to go somewhere in a hurry, and it took her 2 hours to get everything packed and ready to go. And she was so proud of herself that in just 2 hours, only 2 hours, she could have everything ready to go. And then she learned about like the 12-minute thing for people with tornadoes. And she said, wow, 2 hours, that's not going to cut it.
No.
So she started revising her own preparedness plan to see what could she do in a faster time period. And that made me think, well, yeah, you know, if I had to get everything together in a hurry, it might take me an hour. I'm not sure I've got everything because I live inland in New England, where we don't really get a lot of natural disasters. Knock wood.
Not
Yeah.
good, yeah.
Irene came through here a few years ago, but not where I am, a different part of the state. But
Right.
yeah, it just doesn't happen very often that I would need to, in an emergency, get out. But what would I need? What would I grab?
Yeah, I mean, just then when we got, I guess, I think it was Florence in 2018. Not the most powerful thing that we experienced down here, but it was the most impactful because, I mean, we were without power for 9 days, 8.5, 9 days. There was no, everybody was out of gas. There was no
Right.
gas. We had, where I live, I mean, there was pretty much flooding on all the major routes. So we were literally trapped. You know, fortunately we were prepared, but, you know, and tornadoes obviously are clearly devastating, but they come, they go.
Yep.
And you start picking up the pieces. With hurricanes, you don't know when
Right.
the effects are going to stop. And then you know, so that's the thing. That's why earlier I said 3 days. They recommend taking enough stuff for 3 days. And like, just in our small sample size of 8 years, we had to have 12 days worth of stuff, right?
Wow.
And fortunately we did, right? Because, you know, that first tornado warning freaked us the heck out. So I'm very OCD, you know, so, you know, and then, you know, flooding and, you know, wildfires and all the stuff that happens all
Sure.
over the country, you don't know how long that's going to affect you. Like if you, tornado people, and I met this woman years ago. I wish I had her pamphlet still. It was an emergency preparedness pamphlet for animals, but she was out in the Midwest, and like, you know, she talked about all sorts of, you know, geographical circumstances and variables that you have to consider when preparing. So.
Yeah, look down in Florida, is that they're going on, it could be months, depending on where you live. You know, it could be
Oh,
a couple
yeah.
of days, could be weeks, could be months, you know, depending upon how hard you got hit, obviously.
I mean, there's the island, that island, Sanibel Island, that you can't get off of there.
Yeah.
You know, so and half the island is devastated, so I'm sure there's not a lot of supply there as well. So, you know, hopefully.
So one of the things that we haven't discussed, and I don't know what, sorry to interrupt, Joel, was we talked about preparing ourselves and our go bag and the idea of crating and that kind of thing. But I've got 2 dogs in my house. It's very simple for me. I can just throw, and they're toy-sized dogs, so they're very simple to transport and carry around.
Sure.
But somebody like Jeff, who has boarders coming and going, and maybe today he's got his own 2 dogs, and tomorrow he's got 7 dogs on site. And maybe those 7 dogs don't know one another. And maybe, just maybe, they're there because they've got a problem with other dogs. So as a trainer, as somebody who, we have lots of people in our industry who do things like board and train and who work with dogs that have all sorts of issues all over the map.
Of course.
So what do you tell your clients and what do you tell your other dog trainers who, all right, they've got 2 dogs in the house that they're managing who would sooner kill one another than, you know, coexist? What do you do in an emergency when you've got that? What do you do when you're there are people that are pet owners that have multiple dogs in their house that they're managing? And in a house you can do that, but when you have to throw them all in the car in a hurry, what do you do?
Right.
Wow.
And I guess that really what that comes down to is contingency. You know, you can come up with all these plans to do things, but you have to consider everything. And of course you have to consider the relationship of the dogs, the relationship of the dog with people as well. I'm sure that there are certain dogs that,
Yeah.
they may not be too happy, being with so-and-so or whatever, because, so yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
the
so
proximity.
that's where equipment comes into play too, because
Mhm.
I mean, like if we ever have to evacuate, I already know where I can get a Sprinter van, which will house everyone I need to house, with the exception, and then our own animals would go. My wife would drive my minivan, and we have personal pets that don't get along, but they crate well, and they're comfortable enough with each other where they could be crated next to each other. Some of the animals that come here, they need to be in gorilla cages, or if it's for an owner, impact crates. So yeah, there's a little investment involved to be properly prepared,
Mhm.
because gorilla crates, impact crates are not cheap. So if that's something that people need to consider, then they need that has to be prepared in advance, because I mean, we all know, we probably have all seen a dog, a couple of bites, they're out of a wire crate. A couple of chomps, they tear up an airline crate and their head is sticking out, right? That's a recipe for disaster if you have intense animals, right? So even here, I have the gorilla cages, but what I do, I have metal in between each cage too, solid metal, so they
Wow.
can't see each other, because a paw goes through there, somebody's losing a paw,
Right.
right? So if people are in their home situation, if they need to, especially if they have to hop in their vehicle, they need to not just the proper crate, but the proper crate that fits their vehicle.
And
Well,
Yeah, that's
now,
what I was gonna say. I think that's where sometimes, if possible, where you could, all these plans for preparedness is good, but then to sometimes actually do a rehearsal. Where
Mhm.
there's no emergency whatsoever, but you practice those things as best you can, where maybe you have some friends or
that
relatives
makes
that you
sense.
can count on and say, hey, listen, if something God forbid happens, if it's a fire, a flood, or whatever it might be, a hurricane, I want to simulate this and say, listen, my dog loves you and blah, 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 but my dog does not love my other dog, whatever.
Right.
Let's practice. We're going to put my dog in your car and practice going in the car. If they're not
Mhm.
comfortable in the car, obviously you have to desensitize, counter condition,
Sure.
all that, get them used to the car. But assuming they're good with cars,
Mhm.
get them in their car and go on your merry way and practice going from point A to point B, wherever that is.
Yeah.
So
And
they get used to that.
I was
Yeah.
just going to add also, basket muzzles, desensitization to them might, is a good idea, I think,
Yeah.
for every dog,
Yeah.
for a myriad of reasons.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
When I
So-
trained assistance dogs, we did drills where we practiced, like, we yelled out, there's a fire or whatever, and get everybody going. And we had a point that we were all going to meet, off the site, that was down at the corner. This is the designated spot. Try and keep track of, I mean, I don't know who here has a facility. I have not ever had the privilege of owning a facility, but then you have to worry, are all my employees out of the building?
Right.
Who is here today? Who's at work?
Yep.
Is everybody here today? What dogs do we have on site? Is there anybody in a crate in that back room that we use as an extra adjunct, whatever? Make sure it's vacated. Make sure it's really empty. All those kinds of things become, in an emergency, when you're panic stricken, sometimes you don't remember any of that. You just go. So yeah, practicing all of that. And I saw another video of an assistance dog organization. They had a yard out back that was fenced. And in an emergency in their drill, they opened up all the crates and sent the dogs out the door. There was this mass of dogs coming out the door. And I thought, well, now what? But they got them all out of the building. The idea was to get them out of the building.
Sure.
So I guess you can sort them out once they're out.
Yeah.
But yeah, figuring, because I know another dog trainer that this week he's got 2 dogs at his place that don't like each other. And that while he and his wife went to the grocery store, somehow one of them, and it wasn't as though they just stuck a paw out through a crate and got to another dog. They had to breach several, and the 2 of them got into something in the 30 minutes that he was gone. He came home to a bloodbath. So what do you do? To me, it's also the idea of people make excuses for their pets all the time. And there's a lot of rescue dogs that have come with unknown histories, and people write off their dogs. Well, he's a rescue and blah, blah, blah. And he has this problem. But when you're all forced to be together in a small space because there's an emergency, those excuses can't fly anymore. You have to do what you have to do. So, working on fixing dogs' problems and not allowing those kind of iffy temperaments out there as family pets.
Rather than wait until last
Oh,
minute
boy.
when there's really no time to train, and you can kind of do it in a nice, slow, systematic process, and there's a better
Yeah.
chance of success, obviously.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and having your extended, like I'm realizing how important, I mean, even just for people's normal lives, like say you have an emergency and, God forbid somebody has to go to the hospital and you have to be there, then having a walker, sitter, somebody that's
Sure.
trustworthy that you can either come in and take care of your dog or that you could bring to them.
2016,
important.
I took my husband to the doctor at 8:30 in the morning. He had to have surgery that day. We got home at 9 o'clock that night. I did not plan to be gone for 12 hours, but I had a friend who had access to my house who could at least let my dogs out in the middle of the day because I had that very emergency.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah, it does. It becomes important that your dog can be handled by somebody.
Well, here's another example as far as being prepared. Like my wife and I last year, one of my dogs had bladder stone, and it was peeing blood and stuff like that. And we were on vacation, and last minute we weren't prepared in terms of that, and we called, and there was an emergency, vet clinic up there. We ended up paying an arm and a leg for it, and they, basically diagnosed him with a bladder stone. And long story short, he's been taken care of. We got removed that, not there, but there you go. I mean, regardless of what the emergency is, having preparedness to know where you're going as far as what might be in the area, as far as a medical facility.
Sure.
Don't just go there aimlessly and then just start calling through the, any single one,
I have one more thing to add, and I had to USA myself because everybody knows I can get a little potty mouth sometimes.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Take your pets with you, please. Whew, that was really hard.
Yes. So during the last big housing bubble burst, I was in the DC metro area and I had a friend that had Chihuahuas. She was a breeder, Chihuahuas. And she wound up with probably close to 100 rescue dogs at her place, Chihuahuas, that had been abandoned in apartments and houses when people couldn't afford to stay. They left. I mean, what does it mean to take a 6-pound dog with you?
Yeah.
Or a 4-pound dog with you, or even a 10-pound dog with you.
Yep.
But these animals were abandoned when people's circumstances change. So yes, take your animals with you, no matter what.
And I think that that's a good place to leave it for today. I think we actually did have a very interesting discussion on this today. I think we came up with some interesting thoughts, maybe not some answers, but definitely some things that people need to know.
It was very thought provoking.
So with that, I would like to thank you trainers for being here today. I'd like to thank everybody for watching. And don't forget to like us on Facebook and give a thumbs up to this video. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we'll see you next time. Have a good one. Bye.
Great topic, Pam.
Take care.
Thanks. Yes, my friend had like